Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. I hope people are feeling good today. Joining us on this beautiful Boston afternoon. A lot going on in the world around us. But again, I hope that in your own way, you're finding your way to feeling safe and healthy. I want to thank you for joining us for this special Pacesetters event, doing business with P&G Gillette. This is a new type of event launched by the Chamber and the Pacesetters program to enable people primarily in the Black and Brown business community to understand how to do business with different larger businesses in Boston and Greater Boston and indeed Massachusetts that they want to connect with. Over the past couple of years, as we've been engaged with the Pacesetter program, one of the things that we've heard consistently from supplier companies is that they don't really understand, or it's not fully transparent to them, how to do business with different companies. Different industries approach procurement differently, and even within industries, different companies approach procurement differently. So this is an effort to demystify that process. Very pleased to be joined by P&G Gillette today. The Chamber has had a long relationship with P&G Gillette, and it's fitting that they're one of the early events in this series. Right from the beginning of Pacesetters, it was P&G Gillette that we reached out to, because not just here in Boston, but across their national and global footprint, P&G Gillette has been thinking a lot about this issue. I'm sure you'll hear some of that today, but we actually applied a lot of lessons learned to what P&G has done in Cincinnati and how they approach this topic in the build out of the Pacesetters program. And beyond that, on the broader subject of economic opportunity, race, and inclusion, P&G Gillette here in Boston has been a leader. Most recently as one of the sponsors of our Fierce Urgency of Now Fun Festival, a returning sponsorship. We thank them for that. But in all of the Chamber's efforts related to economic opportunity, race, and diversity, P&G Gillette is there. And I want to thank Gary Coombs and Kara Buckley and the whole team at P&G Gillette for that partnership. When procurement is used as an equity tool, it is a powerful solution. It's not the silver bullet, but it's a powerful solution to bridging the wealth gap here in Massachusetts. And that's the goal of the Pacesetters program. Pacesetters attempts to understand and act on the economic case for inclusion across the local business community, state and national business community, and spending that occurs within them on behalf of businesses owned by people of color. So that's what this is all about. Before I introduce today's speakers, a few housekeeping notes about the program. One is that our economic opportunity program broadly is sponsored by John Hancock and Eastern Bank, two institutions of Boston that are, like P&G Gillette, leading the way in this discussion. And I want to thank them for their continued partnership and for engaging their role as corporate citizens within the Greater Boston area. For our attendees today, I want to flag that this webinar is being recorded, and you or others will be able to view it on the Chamber's YouTube page after the presentation. And finally, there will be a Q&A portion to this event. So if you do have questions, submit those questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A feature, making sure to send them to all panelists, or you can email questions to chamberprograms@bostonchamber.com. So with that, I'll introduce today's speakers from P&G Gillette, starting with Tiffany Smith, who is the Vice President of Purchases, Global Grooming, and Global P&G Resins at P&G. Tiffany's responsible for the worldwide purchasing team that manages external spending for the global grooming business unit, including products familiar to many of us at Gillette, Venus, Braun, Joy, The Art of Shaving, and King C, Gillette brands, and for P&G's global resin supply across business units. Tiffany has a wide spectrum of experiences during her time at P&G. She's touched most areas of the physical supply chain, including packaging, raw materials, components, contract manufacturing, and has extensive experience in agency management for the brand building and indirect side of the business. Thank you for joining us today, Tiffany. We also have Marisa Gonzalez, Director of Purchases, Global Grooming, and Global P&G Resins at P&G. Marisa is responsible for the global grooming supplier citizenship effort, including supplier diversity both in the United States and the rest of the globe, as well as the regional Latin America purchasing team that manages spending for grooming business unit products manufactured in Latin American sites. Marisa has 10 years of varied experience working at P&G, including a background in manufacturing, project management, supply chain network optimization, material supply management, and purchasing. Thank you for joining us, Marisa. Lastly, but certainly not least, we're joined by Joyce Lowe, Senior Purchasing Manager of External Supply Solutions and Global Grooming for Procter & Gamble. Joyce has 14 years of purchasing experience at P&G and is currently responsible for the sourcing of contract manufacturing services for the Global Grooming Business Unit. Joyce also leads the Supplier Citizenship Initiative for grooming purchases in North America. She's managed a wide range of direct material spending and worked in P&G's purchases capability and strategy organization, designing processes and systems to drive external business partner performance. And with that, I'll hand it off to Tiffany Smith, who will begin today's discussion. Tiffany?
Great. Thank you, Jim, so much for that wonderful introduction. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. As Jim said, Pacesetters is a fantastic program. We are happy to have been partners from the very beginning with it. It's a natural fit with our broader commitment to diversity and inclusion, and especially to our commitment to supplier diversity. So it's wonderful to have you all here with us today as we talk more about this. As Jim said, I'm Tiffany Smith. As I think about there's a lot of words in that introduction. What I think is important just to hear is I split my time pretty equally between leading our grooming purchasing organization and that of our raw material resins purchasing for P&G. So if I look at the agenda, if I go to the next slide, Joyce, there's a lot of things that we want to share with you today. From this point on, I'll take you a little bit through P&G's corporate citizenship agenda and a little bit just about who we are as a company. Marisa is going to take some time to talk you through how we intentionally turn citizenship into a strategy and what that means for supplier diversity at P&G, how we define it and how we work on it. And then Joyce is going to get into some of the specifics of exactly what it means to do business with P&G. If we've done our part right, we will leave about 15 minutes for Q&A. So it's a lot to cover, so I'll jump right in. As a company, you can see our purpose here. So our purpose is to provide branded products and services with superior quality and value that improve the lives of the world's consumers now and for generations to come. That includes both what we do and what we make and how we do it. And it is that now and generations to come that leads us into having such a big portion of our efforts focused on sustainability, on citizenship, on the impact that we're making on our products through what we can do through the use of the products, as well as how we actually manufacture them. And our aspiration is to do this in a way that's better than our best competitor in every category and every country that we compete, in creating value along the entire process. If you look at the next slide, the P&G, you may know a lot about us, you may not know much about us, but we're a 183-year-old consumer goods company that competes in 6 different product categories. You can see in the slide, we wanted to give you a snapshot of hopefully some of your favorite brands. Tide and Downy, Pampers, Crest. You can see Charmin and Bounty were certainly big ones over the course of the past 6 months. Vicks, Febreze, Olay, Mr. Clean, Always, Tampax. But our personal favorites are in the grooming category. So the next slide is a snapshot of what you guys all probably know best as part of the Boston community. This is the familiar product lineup of everything we do for Gillette, Venus, Braun, The Art of Shaving, and our 2 newest members of the family, which are Joy and King C Gillette, which hopefully you're seeing out in the stores or online now. These are your locally homegrown products developed and designed here in Boston, many of them manufactured right here in Boston. But as we think about this conversation today, you know us likely most from Gillette, but I would like you to appreciate this and listen to today's conversation in the context as total P&G, because that's where we have a much bigger impact and a much bigger opportunity. So if you hit the next one, Joyce, to understand P&G as a whole, excuse me, I think it's helpful to understand how we measure ourselves, because that says a lot about a company. We measure ourselves against total shareholder return. So our objective is a very balanced portfolio of results. So both profit and cash. And what this means is that we equally value sales growth, margin improvement, asset efficiency. And that's important to know because it drives all of our actions. You won't see us working to drive profits really hard one year and then spinning on our heels to really try to drive sales growth in another. Balance and long-term growth are how we've managed this company, and it's key to us. When we talk about being a 180-year-old plus company, it is that balance and weathering the storm and continuing to reinvent yourself, to look at yourself in success over years and not quarters or months. So in line with this long-term focus, this is where the next point of citizenship becomes completely core to who we are as a company. You'll see on here what citizenship means to us, and we'll go into some more details. But what it means is that we want to be known around the world through both our intentional words and very concrete actions as the company who is always responsibly governed and behaves ethically. We want to be open and transparent in our dealings, whether that is our business choices or ingredient transparency. It's an area we're working a ton on. We want to be seen and expected to operate as a good corporate citizen, supporting human rights and good causes and protecting the environment in the way that we run our business. And we want to be seen as an appealing place to work that treats its employees well, which is, again, a place where you see diversity, inclusion, and gender equality start to come to life. So as we think about what citizenship means to us, this leads us down the path to say that we've got 5 very distinct pillars that define citizenship at P&G. Ethics and corporate responsibility, community impact, diversity and inclusion, gender equality, and environmental sustainability. And every one of them has a full blown out, very specific and very transparent and open plan behind it of what our goals are, how we plan to achieve them, what we've done so far, and sometimes even just where we're struggling. We're going to specifically talk diversity and inclusion today. What I will tell you is that if you are at all interested, I would encourage you to go to pg.com to learn more about the other pillars. There's a ton of information out there. And I obviously find it interesting. I think it's a good read, but if you'd like to learn more, I'd encourage you to go take a look at it. All of these pieces have long been part of our DNA. But in the next slide, you can see we've gotten much more externally vocal about what we believe, how we operate, and the actions that we take in recent years. And I think it's important to understand that we believe this is a great opportunity to highlight the strong work that we do, but it's also a really pragmatic business strategy. And this is from now on kind of where we'll start talking about business strategy. So you all as business owners and business leaders, you know as well as anyone else that consumers are changing and they are increasingly interested in the companies who are behind the products that they use. You can see here that, millennials, we all love to talk about millennials, but they are the largest consumer group in the history of the US. And it's proven that 80% of them will buy from a company that supports the causes they believe in. And it's not just that the others won't, it's that 76% will actively avoid companies that don't support the things that they believe in. we look at this as an amazing opportunity because we believe that if consumers get to know us more, this becomes a competitive advantage for us. We are proud of what we stand for, and we've been working on finding ways to be a whole lot more vocal and externally focused on making sure that both our consumers as well as our suppliers understand all the things that we stand for and what's important to us. Which leads us to the next point of supplier citizenship. So being aware and sharing our expectations, our actions, our beliefs are important as a way to both do good and drive growth. This is something you'll hear from P&G a lot. You'll hear us as wanting to be a force for good and a force for growth. And we believe that one of the best ways that we can do that, doing good and contributing to total shareholder return, which drives growth, is through our citizenship program. All three of us on here today are from the purchasing organization. And so we are very, very focused on the external world, how we spend our money, how we do it in a way that fosters responsible sourcing, sustainable innovation, and global supplier diversity. Those are the three core pillars of our supplier citizenship program. So at this point, as I think about that being an intro to P&G, what I would like to do is turn it over to Marissa Gonzalez, who's going to take you into the specifics of the plan and what does that mean to us and how do you turn that into the actions behind what we do on a daily basis. So Marissa, let me let you take it from here.
Thank you, Tiffany. Okay, perfect. So you heard from Jim a little bit about my background. I won't bore you with more details. And I'm going to jump right into what global supplier diversity means for the company, right? So we've actually had a supplier diversity program within the company since 1976. And the whole idea behind it is to grow and develop diverse supply chains, both within the US and with women-owned businesses globally. Okay, we work with several third parties, external parties that not only encourage economic development, but also manage a whole set of range of services and ways of helping business development, right? We work with the National Minority Supplier Development Council, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Business Leadership Network, the National Veteran Business Development Council, the Billion Dollar Roundtable, and globally, we work also with We Connect International. This is all so that we can empower ethnic minorities, LGBT+, military veterans, people with disabilities, and women-owned companies globally. And this program has been fairly successful within P&G. Since 2008, we've actually spent over $2 billion per year in the US alone with certified diverse owned suppliers. So what does it mean to be a diverse owned supplier for P&G? We have two sets of definitions, one that fits the US and the environment, the economic ecosystem that we have in the US, which is any for-profit business that is headquartered within the United States or its trust territories that is at least 51% owned, operated, and controlled by a US citizen who is an ethnic minority, non-ethnic woman, veteran, LGBTQ+, or person with disability, and has been certified by a third party. Our array of third parties that we work with that are capable of certification were in the last slide, right? So we work very closely with all of those partners. And globally, this means a for-profit business that is headquartered outside of the United States and that is at least 51% owned, operated, and controlled by a woman. What this means for our entire kind of like supplier diversity program is that we have a lot of focus on really basically how demographically we are constituted within the US, right? And there is a lot that we can do both locally and at a national level, which Joyce will take us through a bit later. But basically, it's not something that we wanted to just remain with what we can do, with what only we can do. And I'll share a little bit in the next slide about how we are constituted within the company and all of the different areas where we can actually affect change as a purchasing organization and where we can make sourcing decisions that are geared towards really pushing through the agenda of growth and of good and becoming a force for the company. So I'll tell you a little bit about where everybody in the purchases organization sits and how the, let's call it, responsibility of decision is woven throughout the entire company, and how important it is for us that everybody that has a seat everywhere in the purchasing organization within the company is really moving towards advancing our citizenship agenda. Okay, so first, you already saw in Tiffany's previous slide how we have several different business units, right? And how we have a whole host of brands that you hopefully have in your home and that you use and that you love. We have 6 global business units right now, in which the company as a whole is divided. We have beauty, baby and fem care, fabric and home care, family and ventures, grooming, which is the 3 people that are sitting here talking to you, and healthcare. Okay, and within these global business units, there sits a group of people in each of them that is responsible for buying and making all of the sourcing decisions related to anything that is directly going into our products, right? So raw and packaging materials, contract manufacturing decisions, they're all made within the purchasing group that sits within the sector business unit, okay? So for example, as Tiffany was saying, we make all of the decisions for grooming specifically globally, and we're also kind of like a scaled decision maker for anything that is resins or master batch that goes into any of the other business units as well. Okay, and then there is the indirect spend. And we have like 3 different divisions here, because indirect is a little bit more, let's call it indirect, right? So it's defined. We have but marketing and global brand and agency spend that we use for the entire company at a global level. There's also global capital and energy and asset recovery. Okay, and this is a group of people that sits scaled across all of the SBUs and that are located in a corporate function that look after the indirect spend on the global side. We also have a group of people that are sitting within the GBS and IT function that oversee the expenditure that we do on, anything that is IT related or that is service related for internal customers. So for the company to actually, function within itself. And there's also within the, let's call it P&G structure, we have both focus markets and enterprise markets. And these are regionally based organizations that are sitting in North America, in Latin America, in Asia and the Middle East, in Greater China, and in Europe, that make decisions on local or regional marketing-based spend, logistic services, R&D, site, manufacturing, capital, etc. Okay, so as you can see, basically purchases is woven throughout the fabric of the company, right? And we partner internally with all of the different functions and all of the different disciplines to encourage a couple of things, obviously. So first one, as Tiffany was mentioning, is OTSR. They are the stewards that of the dollars that the company is spending, and ensuring that they get spent in the correct way and creating the most overall balanced value falls on the shoulders of the purchasing organization. But also, we have a foothold on every single thing that the company as a whole decides to do and decides to buy, to ensure that we can weave our being a force for good and a force for growth throughout the different levels and throughout the different functions and throughout even all of the organizations or the local organizations that we operate in. Okay, perfect. Next slide, thank you. Now, what this means is 2 things. So the first one is even though we're embedded in all of these organizations and that the purchasing focus, obviously, and the company focus is to ensure that we have the best and greatest beneficial impact that we can have in the communities where we operate and where we grow and where we live. That doesn't stop there, right? What we want to do is obviously look at the first tier, which is basically anything that interacts directly with P&G as our first step and as our internal target to go pursue and to go create more economic empowerment directly. But we also have a lot of power because we do interact with a lot of external businesses and companies and councils and people. And what we want to create is this ripple effect. Imagine throwing, kind of like a little pebble in the middle of a still lake, and how those ripples, right, start expanding outward. That is exactly what we want to create with this idea of the second tier or the third tier even, right, effect. We want to ensure that, even if one of the majority suppliers that we're deciding to work with has a chance to work themselves with diverse suppliers and therefore create economic empowerment throughout the supply chain in expanding concentric circles, that is kind of like exactly what we want to achieve, right? So tier one is all of the suppliers and companies that sell direct goods and services to P&G. And then that second tier is a supplier for a company that we work with that actually is certified diverse and provides a good or a service that helps the first company provide what is contractually accorded with P&G. Okay, so the idea of this expanding circle is that we don't stop at that 2 billion. We make that grow, right? And we have a beneficial effect on the entire organization, and that keeps on expanding. Great. Now, how do we translate this within grooming? There's 3 pillars or 3 things that we're currently doing. So the first one is intentional buyer engagement, right? We need everybody in the purchasing organization for grooming to be, one, entirely aware of our goals and the importance of reaching those goals, and of how important this whole equality and inclusion and diversity strategy is to the business. And we also are creating training and tools for them to actually be able to translate this to their day-to-day work, and to ensure that they have a framework in which to make decisions that support our vision, that support this strategy. Thirdly, we are engaged, we have engaged our leaders within both the company and within grooming specifically, up to our CEO, Gary Kuhn, who is completely convinced that this is one of the priorities that we as a company and as a business unit need to go do and need to go encourage and need to go feed economic empowerment back into the communities that very kindly host us and coexist with us. And it's not only him, it's everybody also in the executive leadership structure of grooming. So with these 3 things together, we believe that we have kind of like an unstoppable force that will continue to advance and to grow, and to ensure that this strategy gets the results that we want. Perfect. What does that mean, right? So we are this unstoppable force that wants to move forward and that wants to keep on creating opportunities for economic empowerment, that wants to keep on creating economic opportunities for economic growth. The future of supplier citizenship at P&G, first off, is we want to achieve the public commitment to spend $100 million with women-owned businesses outside of the U.S. by the end of this calendar year. That is, a huge step forward in a huge growth from the bases that we're coming from, right? And it's one of those ever expanding ripples that we want to get on. We also want to partner with our own suppliers to be a leading voice for growth and change in society, which then also ties back to that ripple effect that we want to create, that we want to make sure that, you know, everybody is clear that this is a priority all the way in our supply chain, right? All the way on the front, from start to finish. And it doesn't start where P&G has contact with the outside. It starts a lot sooner. We also want to be recognized by influencers and consumers as the most diverse, ethical, and sustainable supply chain in the world. And this ties back to what Tiffany was talking about with, you know, how the consumer profile is changing. And build equality and inclusion into key areas of our entire supply and value ecosystem, right? So from start to finish. Okay, so I've told you a little bit about, you know, what supplier diversity is as a strategy for us for grooming when within the company. Now I'm going to hand it over to Joyce Lowe, who will get into the more specifics on how to do business with P&G. Right, that's Joyce. Floor is yours.
Wow. I'm trying to see if I can actually share. Are you able to see me?
No.
I guess I have to see how I can get my video back up. All right.
There, we can see you now.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Joyce Lowe. It is a great pleasure to be here and share with you some perspectives on doing business with P&G. I have been in P&G purchases for 14 years and have spoken with quite a number of companies who are interested in becoming a P&G supplier. I often get asked the question, so how do I become a P&G supplier? I can understand from the outside, we may be perceived as a bit difficult to navigate. But as I think about the companies who have eventually become successful partners to P&G, whether they provide materials or services, they do follow a few common steps, which I would like to share with you today. If you're interested in becoming a successful partner to P&G, step number one is to get to know P&G. P&G has been around for over 180 years, and we are always changing and evolving. Knowing where we are today and where we are heading to in the future and how your business can play a role would be important. And a good place to get started is our company website. You can go to pg.com and explore our brands and products. And you can also listen to our last shareholders calls to understand our key strategies and priorities. It is also very important to know what does not change in P&G, and that is our purpose, values, and principles, and we call that PVP internally. Tiffany spoke about P&G's purpose and aspirations earlier. We believe in finding small but meaningful ways to improve lives now and for generations to come. Our purpose unifies us in a common cause and growth strategy, and it inspires P&G people to make a positive contribution every day. Our values and principles are built on key elements, including integrity, leadership, ownership, passion for winning, and trust. And taken together, our PVP are the foundation for P&G's unique culture, and this does not change no matter how much we grow. In addition to embracing the company's PVP, our purchases people are guided by 5 global sourcing principles, and they are the foundation for our discipline and serves as guidelines in how we interact with external suppliers. And these 5 principles are best total value, and I will talk more about this point later. Honest, ethical, and fair dealings, externally linked supply solutions, competition and collaboration. And what we mean by that is we apply the strategic use of competition, collaboration, or a blend of the two in our approach towards managing our supply relationships. We also value supply incumbency. We don't have time to go into each one in detail today, but I would encourage you to go to pgsupplier.com to learn more about each of them. And after you have done the research on P&G and think that there's a good fit between your company and our company, the next natural question is, who do I talk to and what do I do next? And I would say step 2 on doing business with P&G is to talk to folks in purchases. At P&G, we have budget owners in different functions like brand, R&D, etc., who can decide what to spend their money on. But it is purchasers that decides how to actually spend it. Our purchasers organization plays a key role of bringing the outside in and the inside out. Purchasers is responsible for every dollar the company spends, as well as the strategy, governance, and stewardship that comes along with it. And as Marissa mentioned earlier, depending on the materials or services the supplier provides and which business units they are used for, we may have a different purchasing contact. And for MBEs on this webinar who are interested in working with P&G, we will provide an email address at the end of the session. And we encourage you to write to us, and we are happy to help link you with the right purchasing contact in the company. There are a few things we suggest you keep in mind when you reach out to us regarding any opportunity. At P&G, we make sourcing decisions on the basis of best total value, and this is one of the key sourcing principles I mentioned earlier. Best total value is driven by business needs, and it includes not only cost, but also a range of elements such as quality of goods or services performed, supply responsiveness, innovative ideas, speed to market, payment terms, suppliers' willingness to share risk or provide resources, supply spending with diverse suppliers, and as well as suppliers' commitment to citizenship. All these are taken into account when we make sourcing decisions, and I would suggest you think about how your offering help deliver against these different elements in advance. And the other suggestions we have to our prospective suppliers or agencies is that do try to link your ideas or products to our business needs. It ties back to the beginning of this segment about getting to know P&G. We believe that the more you know who we are, what our needs are, and the better you can show how your product or services or offerings is a solution to our problem, the higher the rates of success would be for your proposal. So it's 3:40 now, and we want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A. So Marissa, back to you.
Perfect, thank you. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we will open now for questions and answers after a couple of words from Tiffany on the actual question and answer. So Tiffany, do you want to introduce the section?
Absolutely. So we are happy to answer questions for you. There's a couple things I will share with you. One is, as Joyce mentioned, and she put the website on there, we have a site available for everyone, which is pgsupplier.com, which is normally the place where we would tell all interested parties to go kind of register and share their information. Knowing that we're trying to do something special here, this is where you see the email address that was created there for groomingsuppliers.im@pg.com. So we created this just for this group here to have a place to get more, I will call it direct answers from likely one of the three of us, or we'll connect you into someone else so that we can make sure that nobody's question from Pacesetters group here goes unanswered. So I would encourage you to use that, as well as look at the other sites for information, but we have this here just for you. The one thing I will tell you before we jump into the questions is just based on confidentiality reasons and some other risk profiles that we're working through, we will decline from sharing any of the names of partners that we use today. I know a lot of times the questions are, who do you use for this and who do you use for that? So we won't share names, but we're happy to talk through process and general work areas and things like that, just not the specifics of a company name or number. All right, let's get started, Marissa.
Okay, perfect. So our first question is, from beginning to end, how long does it typically take for a new vendor and contract to be finalized?
It's a great question, and it's always a good question if the answer is it depends, right? Which is what everyone always loves to hear. So it depends on what the product or the service that's being provided is. You can imagine that for specific products or materials that will go into any one of our products, whether it is a Grooming or anywhere in P&G. It can be a long process because you can get very much into qualification time and running into our plant and how do we run and getting you set up. So it can be many months as we think about that. When we look more on the services side, or even some of the more, I'll call it materials that don't reach the consumer but are used at our sites instead, it can be relatively quick. What I will tell you is the first step that we take with any new supplier is what I'll call a risk management profile. So we have a system that's managed where, depending on what we're about to potentially buy from someone, we do ask that we go through an information security assessment. If you're going to be managing personally identifiable information, you have to help us talk through how you manage and control and protect that information. So there are certain layers that we ask people to go through just so we don't end up exposing the company to unnecessary risk. But it will go anywhere. During COVID, we were adding suppliers in a day. And during the normal time, it can be, call it weeks to months, depending on the specificity of what you're providing. So I know that wasn't a really, call it concrete answer you were probably looking from, but I'll call it the easier and the less risky the service that you're providing, the faster that we can bring someone in. All right, what's next?
Okay, perfect. So next, what are top 3 areas of spend that vendors of color should be aware of for the upcoming year?
Also a good question. As I think about, I'm going to answer this in a couple different ways. So when I think about, again, we look at specifically locally here in Boston, there's a variety of spaces that are just naturally more prone to spend that I know is coming in the year ahead. As we think about, obviously, facility services are a place that we always use. What I will tell you is we do have a managed service provider. This is the one name I will share with you. Sodexo manages all of the service providers or the services for our Boston and our Andover sites. They also do it for other sites around the country. And so what we can do is kind of do a hand-holding introduction between the partners and see if there's a connection that we can create there and open up a lot of opportunities in the facility management. Similarly, there is always some sort of construction happening, whether it is facility updates or expansions or changes. So there is certainly construction opportunities available and again, building upgrades in the coming year. And then I think one of the things that we're also always looking for as we think about from a marketing standpoint, as we look at updating, whether it is some of the digital marketing or how we're working on our direct-to-consumer brands or direct-to-consumer connections, there's always space there of how do we think about different and new ways to connect with the community and connect with our consumers. So those are some of the top 3, I would say. As a whole, though, there is always opportunity for things that are spent both at Gillette and in the broader context of P&G.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one here is for Joyce. What are some specific guidelines that you can share to a new vendor who wants to work with P&G?
I think it goes back to what we talked about, a little earlier. I mean, it depends on the opportunity, but, in general, we look at total best value. Their cost is certainly an element, but there's also a lot of other things that goes into it. Speed to market, if you have a great idea, we'll always take a look at that. I don't know if if there's something specific, you can send me an email at the groomingsupplier.im@pg.com, and then we can discuss that in more detail.
Perfect. Okay. Next question, actually, this one is up for grabs, so, feel free to jump in, either Tiffany or Joyce. What is your advice for getting into the GBS IT procurement, since this is across all business units?
Yeah, so what I will tell you is similar to what Joyce just said. For this group in particular, in the conversation that we're having in the assistance to try to drive Pacesetters, more connections and potentially, ideally, more business, what I would encourage you to do is reach out to that groomingsuppliers.im email that's on the screen right now. tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us what you're looking to get connected in potentially to do and what services you offer. And we will make the connection behind the scenes to what we have as the cross business unit, GBS and IT partners. In a normal world, I would tell you to go to pgsupplier.com and register yourself there, but leave it up to us to kind of make the connections behind the scenes. And then what it will be is likely not one of the three of us that have to do with very specifically buying that, but we'll get the right person to reach out and see if there's an opportunity or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next question is actually related to, small businesses. Mm-hmm. Okay, so first off, as a small company, please explain how supplier incumbency affects one's selection. And two, is there a certain level of annual revenue a company must have in order to be a P&G supplier?
Yeah, no, great questions. So supplier incumbency, which obviously you saw is one of our 5 core principles as we think about our sourcing decisions that we make. It is again, both a practical and a relationship-based principle that we have. So supplier incumbency, meaning suppliers that own the business today, we value that and we give a benefit of the doubt nod towards the existing supplier. We likely have spent a long time with someone, getting them comfortable, building the relationship, understanding how to work with us. We understand how to work with them. That is all just hours and time that it takes to get 2 companies to work together in a really connected and symbiotic way. So we don't want to lose that. When all things are equal, we will always give the nod to the incumbent because they get the benefit of the doubt. However, we never want incumbency to be mistaken for entitlement. So just because someone has the business today does not mean that it needs to be theirs if they can't compete with the market around them or they can't continue to meet our business needs. So I would look at it as both, once you're in, it is a benefit that we will always give you kind of the nod one way if things are close. But it is not a reason to say that just because somebody else has had the business for a long time that we're not open to consider what the other options would be. And then I would also add on there the question about, is there a minimum annual revenue? Again, I will tell you it depends. So depending on what you're trying to supply us, whether it is something where we need the consistency and the guarantee that you can handle the volume that we might run through your business, then it probably will matter that we need to know you're established and you have enough of a size that this is not going to be the kind of volume that throws you off center. But if we're talking about individual services, or we need some help here or there, or they're more spot buys, then we don't really have any minimum. What we need to know is that you are capable. You've got a bit of a track record to show that you've been able to do this before, but we're not looking for a dollar value on revenue to make you call it qualified for P&G.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. Great answer, Tiffany. And I think we have time for one last question. I'm going to take this one. So this is a combination of 2 of them. First one is, does your team offer mentoring opportunities for new suppliers? And do you provide introductions to tier 1 companies? So the answer here is a bit holistically. Our central purchasing team actually does have kind of like a matchmaking initiative ongoing that provides an arena for introductions, right, between MBEs or other, like minority-owned businesses and our, bigger tier 1 companies that we work with. Again, all of this, obviously, for more details, you're going to have to actually shoot us an email on the groomingsuppliers.im so that we can better understand kind of like what you're offering and if we can invite you to one of these like matchmaking activities that we have. And that's more or less, the extent of what we do as a full kind of like a mentoring or external connection program. But we're happy, as Tiffany said, to work behind the scenes and ensure that, the information gets to the right people and that we provide as much support and as opportunity as we can.
Yeah, let me just add one more comment on top of Marissa's there, which is when we think about the mentoring options, especially to new suppliers, particularly small business owners, there's a number of things that we do, including we have a team that we call the Supplier Diversity Advisory Council, which means we have pulled together about 10 diverse suppliers that we meet with on a quarterly basis to have them help talk us through what is it like to work with P&G? What can we learn? What should we do differently? How do we tell them the things that they're coming and asking for help on? What are programs that we can connect together and try to do as a whole? And oftentimes that Supplier Diversity Advisory Council will come back and say, let's host an event for just your diverse suppliers that help talk you through a better education of purchasing, or do you need more about having a connection into just navigating our systems and making sure that you understand where you should be connected and not. So it isn't always necessarily a one-to-one mentorship, but we have lots of programs that are kind of there to buffer the system a little bit for our smaller suppliers, and particularly our smaller diverse suppliers.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. I think we might have time for us one more question, a small one. Is there anybody that would like to submit one?
I think there's one out there specifically.
Oh, yes.
From
I'm sorry.
Yes. One of the attendees who is a food supplier who's interested in being connected to us. And this is where we'll give you the same answer, but what we'll do is we can make the connections into Sodexo, which obviously I know runs a food service, but what they also do is help us coordinate a lot of our catering or a lot of our events where we bring food in. And they also continue to help bring in, we'll have events that say a day a week are sponsored by a certain ethnic type of food or some healthy options that come from the outside. So we can make that connection for you and see if there's something we can create as an opportunity. And I think there was a question also in there, just can you share the material, and we can figure out how to absolutely, especially on the certification partners, have this shared out to you. And then obviously this whole video is available from YouTube to come back and rewatch or listen to any of the questions later. So with that, I will say thank you all for joining us. Hopefully this covered at least some of what you were hoping to get from us in the hour today. We're happy to answer questions. Just reach out to us and we can see what we can provide for you offline. But I appreciate the time that you're taking to learn more about us. It's a fantastic program that Pacesetters is offering. And I think that the more the connections that we can make, both on a local to local level, but also help bring some of the local suppliers to our broader US and global company and our needs is a fantastic opportunity for us. So appreciate your time. And back to you, Jim, at this point.
Okay. I think I'm back on. Well, maybe not. How's that? Yeah. Great. Well, this was a fascinating conversation. First, Joyce, Marisa, Tiffany, thank you so much for that information. We continue to learn through this Pacesetters program, and as you were presenting the perspective on procurement and purchasing with a company like P&G, contrasted with the Red Sox and Gilbane Construction, who we had on over the last couple of weeks, who have a much sort of, more local, regional perspective. I think for all of us, understanding the broader global lenses through which you think about these issues is important. Also embedded within one of your answers, I found it interesting that while you may do business with a food supplier like Sodexo or hire a construction company to build something, it sounds like you're intentional about their sub-suppliers too. So there may be opportunities there. And, a big takeaway from me is your willingness to continue the conversation. I mean, creating a unique email address for this audience is a wow, and your willingness to try to, work with each one of them that reach out is really special. So, so thank you for doing that. Thank you to the entire P&G Gillette team for, as I said at the beginning, their continued partnership, not just with the Pacesetters program, but in Boston on a lot of issues related to race and economic opportunity. Before we go, I do want to highlight a few upcoming events in our Doing Business series. We have scheduled Berkshire Bank on October 14th, a regional bank, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. A lot of interest among our supplier community in Blue Cross Blue Shield on October 28th. You can attend that session. A lot of companies have signed up to participate, and we will be scheduling in the not too distant future Boston Children's Hospital, John Hancock, Eastern Bank, and Mass General Brigham. Some of you know them under their former name of Partners Healthcare. So stay tuned for an announcement on those programs. You can learn more about those and other programs of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce on bostonchamber.com. Once again, thank you to our panelists and thank you to all of our participants. Have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you again. Bye.
Thank you.